Hello everyone, welcome to Piano Lin TV. This is your host Alexander Bui and Jeremy Au is our co-host. We have our first ever returning guest, Rachel Chen. Please say hello. Hi Rachel.
Hi guys. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. How are you?
I'm good.
So if you guys don't remember, Rachel was one of our guests on our episode 9. And she was talking about leadership. And we're very fortunate to have her back today as she will be talking about teaching students on the spectrum. This is a very special topic for her. And ever since she spoke to me about it, I actually became a little bit more interested and intrigued. Because, people with some sort of disability, it doesn't mean that they can't learn. We just have to create a better environment and a better focus and look from their own perspective. And that's everything, not just within music, but sports as well. As you can see from the Olympics, we have the Paralympics, and that doesn't stop them from competing. So Rachel, how did you first become interested in teaching students with autism?
Yeah, so it actually started my sophomore year in undergrad. So I was teaching, private students just to kind of earn money on the side. And I was approached one day by a parent. That was actually through Craigslist, because at that time, that was like how you get students. You post on there and parents would contact you. And so I got an email from this parent that was like, well, I saw your ad, want to get in contact with you, and would you be able to teach my son? But, there is, he has autism, he's on the spectrum. And so I said immediately to her, like, I would love to, but I don't think I'm qualified at all because I've never taught anyone like that. But I would love to have an opportunity and a chance to do that. So we did meet up, and the parent was like, I was still like kind of worried, but the parent just like said, don't worry, we just need patience. And if you're willing to like slowly learn with like, each other, and if you have the patience, then, you would be a good fit. And I said, okay. So I started that, and he was my first student. His name is Gavi. And I taught him for 5.5 years. Before that, he had other teachers, but there was a gap, like 2-year gap in between me and his last teacher, just because they were trying to find a teacher for him, and all the teachers didn't really have, I guess, that patience. And didn't want to take him. So he's very talented, but the parents were just like very sad that like no one was willing to take him. And so, yeah, 5.5 years, and he ended up going to Eastern Michigan because the year before I left, I was like, I might not be here for my doctor program. So what should we do? Should we start to find you another teacher? And his mom was like, actually, I know this would be crazy, but would it be possible if he auditioned for a university or a community college next to where we live? And I said, not at all, like, let's give it a shot. And so we prepared for it. The requirement was just 2 pieces, and he was learning pretty hard rep already, and he got in. And so, like, I'm very proud of him. And like, of course, through him, and there is a community of those kind of students, students on the spectrum. And so the word kind of got out there, like after I taught Gavi. And so I started getting more students like that in my studio. And then eventually I built a studio like that. And then now that I'm at IU, I want to do that kind of for my research. For my doctorate, I do want to kind of make like teaching more accessible, and I want to help other teachers who was in my shoes before, like who didn't know what to do, you know, when they have a parent ask them, hey, like these are issues with my kids, could I get the same opportunity? So it's kind of like that, like they deserve the same experience and same things as like a normal student. Yeah.
What kind of behavior do the kids like that have in the lesson usually?
Yeah, so it really depends on, I don't know other special needs students. I'm more familiar with students on the spectrum. There's high functioning, middle functioning, low functioning. So for example, Gabby would be more high functioning, but the most common behavior is the nonverbal. So if you have a child who comes to you, usually you'll notice that they lack communication skills. So that's they're nonverbal, and they usually will have someone like a SLP, like a speech language pathologist, or even a music therapist to kind of guide them through different languages. So yeah, so first nonverbal, it's hard to communicate with them. They don't really know the social cues. So for example, like I don't know, like I never saw this happening, but I've read it elsewhere. Like if there's a girl, you know, walking down the street in a skirt, like someone with autism would like lift their skirt, not because they're creepy or anything, but just they don't know that this is not okay. Or I had a student like just wanted to kiss me, little kid, little boy. And like they got really close. They didn't know like boundaries. And it's just like they don't know. So like, yeah, social norms, they are very hypersensitive. So like any environment, like the lights, when we go into a room, they're going to be like freaked out if it's not the light that they normally see. Or if the room is like messy, then they will like be more sensitive compared to a normal student who would just go into the room and be like, oh, like I'm sitting in here. Yeah.
I want to jump in and ask you, Rachel, is it usually the parents who notify you of the students if they have that sort of autism?
So if usually now that if parents come to me, like students with autism, they kind of know that I teach these kind of students. So they would immediately tell me, you know, here are the symptoms, not symptoms, but here are the behaviors of my kid. My kid is high functioning, low functioning, or, you know, all these details. But if you are like a teacher who have never taught any kid like that, and the parent come to you, some of them wouldn't disclose all of that information to you. But you'll obviously know, like from experience, like, you know, this kid, there's something going on with this kid. So then that's when you would have a conversation with the parent, but in a very gentle way, and always say like, I am here to support your child. I want to work together. And is there anything I don't know, and that you would like to share with me to better help your kid in this lesson? So in that way, and the parent would usually be like, yeah, like most of the time would be like, yes, here are some of the things. If they're still kind of like not willing to say it, then you could also say, how are the teachers like at the school? Like, how is he behaving in school? Or what is the best way to help your child do blah, blah, blah task? You know, I'm having trouble. Like always communicating with the parents is always very important. Yeah, when having students like that.
What kind of technique do you use to teach those kind of kids?
I don't think there is like a technique, but I think just like rewiring the way you think. You're not there to change them, but you're there to prevent and support. So I say that because it's like you're preventing them from, you know, like when you're teaching something, preventing them from playing the wrong note, because for them, they're very much, if they play it this way, it's going to be so hard for them to change, because they love structure. They really do. And once they have that in their brain, it's just like it'll take them forever. So just preventing them from making mistakes, and then supporting them, meaning like if they do, then what could I do to kind of break things down? So I think jumping back to your other question about what are the similarities or common traits is they love routine. For a kid who, like a normal kid, if you say, okay, play this 5 times or 3 times, then they'll be like, oh, like, okay, fine. But for them, when they hear that, they're actually like really excited because they're like, okay, this is first time. Now I'm going to do a second time, third time, fourth time. So keeping that routine, keeping things simple, because again, they're nonverbal. Nothing vague. Don't say, what do you think about when you play this? Because they really see the world in black and white. You can try to start to like relate some of their interest into the piano, but that's maybe a little bit later when you build like a personal relationship with them, and start to know, okay, maybe this kid is really into movies or they really like to draw. Yeah.
I may came across some students like this and I didn't realize it. There's a student who is very shy, but also was not very communicative with me when I asked questions. So I had a little trouble, teaching the lesson, and I kind of guessed, as you said, they see it in black and white. And I wasn't sure of this kid. I never asked the parents. I was younger, and I was challenged by this. But when I teach, I'm actually pretty fun, and I'm always trying to think what the kid is trying to think as well, and I always see it in their eyes. I think in general, when you talk with people and you look into their eyes, you kind of get what they're feeling. So when I looked into this kid's eyes, I saw he was not very confident and also didn't want to answer the question. So I gave him like multiple choices. I said, do you think happy or sad? And he looked up to me, he said, happy. So he instantly like kind of smiled when he said that. This may not be the case. This kid may be an actually normal kid. But that's what, like, being a teacher, being able to handle a kid. And I know not everyone is able to do this, but it's really with experience as well at dealing with other people, especially in your network, whatever field you're in, and exposing yourself to that. So I really admire you, Rachel, for doing this, because not everyone can do it, and it actually is challenging. But the more you do it, the better it is, and you've learned to grow your love for these types of students and being able to help them, which is great, because you're one of those people that can now contribute to those kids who want to learn piano, but with a teacher that can care for the way that they learn.
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you said you look at their eyes, because I definitely, I definitely like relate to that as well. I always make sure, like, I always look at their eyes, and then when they're kind of zoned out, I'm like, I'm looking at your eyes. And they would be like, oh my gosh, what in the world? But yeah, seriously. Or like if they're distracted, I can tell. But like one kid that I'm teaching right now who is on the spectrum, his eyes is like everywhere. And that was really challenging. So I like totally understand where you're feeling, and like just not being focused, disinterested, because you so want the kid to like learn, so yeah.
But a lot of kids, they're like that, you know what I mean? Even if they're normal, I guess when they're younger, even myself, sometimes they can't focus in the lesson, and they look all over and then a lot of even normal kids do that, and I guess a lot of teachers, they think, oh, this kid has disability, or this kid has disability. And of course, some of them do have disability, but when they get older, they're normal, so it could just be, they just need to grow, their brain needs to develop.
Yeah,
a lot of the time.
Right. It's like kids are developing at a strange stage. And what I always tell to people is think from their perspective. Because they've only reached to the highest point. Let's say they're 7 years old and we are maybe 25, 30. They don't know what being 15 is. So we gotta really step back and think, why are they being distracted? If you are 7 years old, would you be distracted as well? Is what your teacher thinking what you're saying, is that boring to them? But this is more of a more generalizing kids in general. But it's even harder when they're on the spectrum. So you're adding on top of that challenge as you're teaching.
Right. Yeah.
So Rachel, what are the best practices in a piano lesson for a student with autism?
I guess the best practice would be, like I mentioned earlier, understanding what they need to best support them, which is structure. So for me, I always greet, they always are going to be on time because they're I need to be there right at 10. In their brain, it's everything is a schedule. And if something is off schedule, if today, for example, their mom is not picking them up or they have to be walked home, they would throw a fit, they would throw a tantrum. It really just throws them off. So making sure you're on time, making sure that you always do the same thing when you greet them. If you, I actually talked to a few people a couple days ago on this, and they were saying that their studio is in the house. So there's a lot of distractions on the way to the piano room. And so I suggested you can maybe have a carpet that goes directly towards that. So then it's okay, just follow this path. And then for me, I think always having a 3-step plan. So I tell them, okay, today we're going to start with this, this, and this. Have a visual thing, because they're also very visual people. They like pictures. They understand visually better. So visually, they know and expect what is coming up next. And then when we get to the pieces, also have the 3-step, notes first, then rhythm, then break it down. Then the 4th step is repeat 3 times. So they always know and they feel good that they accomplished it. So I think that's good to know. And then because they have that structure, they can practice that same way. Yeah. And then I think to add on, Alex, to your thing about earlier, what you said, I think it's really important for a teacher to kind of break down all of the traditional way of thinking when you teach these students, the way you were taught, or the way you would solve these passages, because each student is different and each lesson will be different. To kind of break down that ego, to not make it about you and to make it about them. Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Rachel. That's great. And we're so fortunate for you to be here again with us, because I don't think people talk about these. In school, you're taught to teach. I mean, there are teaching classes, method books, but that's only for quote-unquote normal people. However, there's more beautiful people out there outside the norms, and this is great. This I hope people are listening to this. If you're thinking about teaching students, with autism, special needs, that it's not impossible. It's a challenge at first, but look at Rachel. She's started at 1, now she's doing 2, 3, and she added more students to her studio that way, and she enjoys it. So don't think that a challenge is to avoid them. Maybe they need you, and maybe you're the right teacher for them. So thanks again, Rachel. It was a pleasure having you here on Piano Land TV on the episode of Teaching Students on the Spectrum. This is your host, Alexander Bui, and co-host Jeremy Al. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe, and follow us on our podcast platforms. We have them every week, Thursdays, and we have our teaching videos, Tuesdays and Saturdays. Take care. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.